Hey, everybody. I'm sure that you would like to know how you could raise $7 million in your first 12 months in the real estate business, starting from zero, starting from scratch. Well, today's guest is going to explain how he did it and how you could possibly do it too. I'm really happy today to welcome Craig Stevens to the show. Craig, great to have you. How are you?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Jonathan. Appreciate it. I'm doing well.
So give everybody sort of a brief snapshot of where you are now. What's the business snapshot for Craig Stevens at the moment?
So I recently left my job in corporate America about a year ago and turned my attention fully to real estate investing. I've been doing that on the side as a side job for many years, but I decided to go full time into this. So I have a property management company. I'm running short-term rentals in New Jersey, and I'm also doing capital raising. So very focused on capital raising for other syndications that lead sponsors are running.
So I want to talk to you about how you got into this, but let's talk about your background a little bit. You'd mentioned to me before we started recording that you'd worked in various different positions in corporate America, some very high level positions as well. But here you are, having left all that behind, and now you're focusing full time on real estate. So just tell me how that happened. How did you make that move? Where did you start, and how did you get to where you are now?
I've been spending about 25 years prior to leaving my role. I was 25 years in corporate America. I started out as a CPA working at Deloitte and Touche, doing audit work there. And then I switched over into working in a lead finance roles in different insurance companies and banking entities. And during that time, I was enjoying my job. I found it very challenging. I was working a ton of hours, but I always had to report up to someone else, kind of abide by their rules, follow their activities. And it started to get a little daunting on me that I wasn't able to kind of determine my own destiny. So I determined my exit would be to start investing in something or doing something that I could have a sooner retirement than most. So I started investing in real estate about 10 years ago, buying up properties in New York and in Indiana, just under my own personal portfolio. And the idea was to just build that up large enough where I could eventually leave my day job.
So tell me how that happened. I mean, you were working where when this happened, and sort of what was your first, just tell me a little bit more about how you built this portfolio that you established.
I built up that portfolio just through my own means, with 9 buildings, 35 tenants, and the largest one was just a 9-unit building. And then I also was investing in some other syndications as a limited partner investor, so passively investing in some syndications as well. I realized that I just wasn't able to kind of scale up as quickly, and that wasn't going to be my only way out by buying my own real estate. So that's when I started understanding the world of syndications more and thinking maybe I would run my own syndication. But I finally made that decision, that turning point to leave my day job and focus full time on real estate investing.
And so what was the sticking point that you couldn't overcome? Why not just continue to build the portfolio until you reached the point where you could retire? Was it that it wasn't happening fast enough, or you ran out of funds, or you ran into some, bandwidth issues? Like, what was the problem?
It was becoming very difficult, even though I had good property managers, very difficult to manage those properties while I was working my full-time job, especially spread across several states. I didn't have the personal bandwidth, and it was becoming exhausting on me. But also my money could only go so far, right? So I was making good money in a leader role in finance, but I still did not have enough to quite build up that portfolio fast enough to get where I needed to be. So that's when I started realizing, okay, if I leave my day job, I can start focusing my attention on scaling up my portfolio faster by working with others on syndications or creating my own syndication.
So, and you mentioned also that in somewhere along the lines, you built a property management company for short-term rentals. Tell me a bit about that.
We owned a property in New Jersey, in Levelette, New Jersey, and we were renting it out. We were using it for our personal use and also renting it out during the summer, during certain weeks. We're doing well with it, but we were living a couple of hours away, and we found a difficulty in getting a good property manager that could manage our property for us. There are plenty of agents that would list your property, but not many that would manage it for you. So that's when I came across the idea that we should develop a property management company in that area that can help with listing your property, but also be hands-on managing your property. There's a lot of owners that live in New York City, work in New York City area or Philadelphia that are quite far from their beach homes, but they still want to get some extra income and rent them out. So that's who we're serving now.
And so how many homes do you have under management at this point with that company?
Right now we have 12 properties. We've been open for about a year now. And we're trying to see how we can scale up that business as well to make that business model larger where we can manage more properties. So I'm just in the process of hiring more individuals to help to grow that.
So that's actually, so you're doing these things in sort of parallel tracks. So you have your own portfolio that you're still operating. You have the short-term rental management business, and then also capital raising for other people's deals. That's correct?
Yeah, it definitely keeps me busy. So I have two startups essentially that I'm working on, the capital raising and the property management.
So, okay, so you're sort of focused on both of those things, which is great. So what is it about sort of the capital raising that attracted you?
I was learning more even when I was in corporate America. I was always curious about real estate. I was listening to podcasts and reading books and trying to just absorb as much information as I could. And I really got excited about this world of syndications, that you could just get into large transactions using other investors to sit alongside you and reap the returns of real estate of these large transactions, especially if you were managing it. So I thought that maybe I'd want to lead my own syndication. But by owning my own properties prior to that, I realized I'm growing a little bit weary of managing assets myself. So rather than that, maybe I can leverage off of my network that I have from working in corporate America for so many years and look to raise capital for other syndicators instead. Start out that way, right? And maybe I'll turn over 2 syndications eventually. Well, it was a big hit. My first raise, I raised $1.4 million. I was nervous. I didn't know if I could do it. I told the sponsor that I could raise $1 million, and I ended up at 1.4. And after that, I've been comfortably able to raise around $1 million to $1.5 million for each transaction.
I mean, $1 million though, that's a pretty big lift for most people. And to on your first sort of try to say, hey, I can raise $1 million, that's kind of a gutsy move. So how did you, what was it that made you think that you could do it?
Guts and maybe a little stupidity and luck. So, I just really felt that I had been talking about my real estate investing. I never made it a secret while I worked in corporate America. I spoke with my friends and family about it all the time. I had set up a company online. I had a website up. I was on social media displaying my real estate investing that I was doing personally. And people along the years got excited and were asking me questions about it a lot. So I think that gave me the confidence that I had a very interested network of individuals, high net worth individuals, right, that were working in corporate America that I could tap into. I wasn't sure how far or much I could tap into that group, but it turned out that after some really a hard push for the first transaction, I was able to get together with my list of potential investors, send out emails, trial and error, and start to learn the ropes of raising capital. And I was able to get to exceed my goal, which I had told the sponsor I'd raise 1 million.
And so, tell me sort of on a nuts and bolts level how you did this. Was this, you mentioned email, but was it, were you sending out blast emails, sending out individual emails, or picking up the phone? Was it kind of all of the above? Kind of walk me through what you did on that first deal to actually get that money in the door.
I wasn't very prepared, so I didn't have a good CRM list of investors at that point. I was starting pretty much from scratch. I had probably put together a few Excel spreadsheets here and there of potential investors over the years, but never very deep and never very smartly thought out. So the first thing I did was just, in a fast way, go through my phone list, go through my social media list, go through my email contacts, and just start putting lists of names of all the individuals that I knew and their contact information, building out that list, and then starting to rank them on a scale of kind of high, medium, low as to how likely I thought they would be to invest. And then also how much what did I think they would invest. And I was able to kind of strategize off that list. I mean, I probably started out with just maybe 75 names. And I've grown that list up to 1,700 now through various means just after 12 months, right? But it's the 1,700 doesn't matter. You really need that core of, what I found was 30 or 40. I was really nervous about making sure I had as many names as I could possibly get to, but a lot of them are not meaningful. It's those close network individuals that I was able to email. At points, I would call them. I would send out a few mass emails and then some specific emails and then some texting as well. So just like you said, a mix of all three of those communication means.
And so the people who wound up investing with you, were they like the inner circle, sort of friends and, family and close friends, or were they sort of like the circle outside that, like people that you know fairly well, but they're not really the inner circle? I'm curious sort of where they fell in terms of how many kind of concentric circles out from you they were.
It was a lot of acquaintances that maybe used to be close coworkers in the past of mine that I was able to connect with that had been asking me about real estate more frequently. I think those were the ones that were probably the hot ones. They weren't necessarily my core group of friends or family. I actually found that my core group of friends and family were probably harder to turn at times into investors. It was probably those people that had shown curiosity already about wanting to learn more about investments, that still had trusted me and had grown observant of what I've been achieving. And that made them curious enough to get in touch with me and actually want to learn more. So those were the investors that were probably a little bit stronger on the second circle or maybe even the third circle out.
Yeah, I think that's what I've found myself too, is that it's not so much, but when you start out in this business, people say, well, go to your friends and family. But that's often really difficult. Like it's very difficult to go to somebody that you know very well and you have a particular kind of relationship with and say, hey, I want to transform this into a business relationship with you by getting your money. And it's a hard conversation. It's very uncomfortable, right? And I think it's uncomfortable for both sides of the conversation. So, but I think a lot of people are under the misapprehension that that's where they have to start, right? It's sort of like probably everybody has, at least if they're kind of like around, my age, and we kind of look like we're around the same age, they had that like first job years ago in multi-level marketing or something that they didn't know that was they didn't know what they were getting into, and they answered some ad in the paper and it turned out to be some sales gig, and and they were always like, hit up your friends and family, get your mom to buy the Tupperware or whatever it is that you were selling. And so they think, oh, that's what you're supposed to do, but it's really the people who are kind of like one layer removed from you that are the ones
Yeah,
that are more likely to invest with you.
absolutely. It's people that it's not necessarily friends of friends. It's still people that you know and have spent time with in the past, but you probably just aren't on their speed dial list of people that they would expect to hear from. Maybe it's the novelty of all of a sudden hearing from you on something that has potentially interested in them. I came from a bit of a lower income family, lower medium income family from New Hampshire. So I knew that my family was not going to be one of my core investors. So that was already off the list. So I had to kind of start to think outside of the box as to where else I would go for that.
And then how did you said you started building your list into a bigger list. How did you go about doing that?
That came with help. So I would reach out to somebody on, either Fiverr or Upwork and have them start to go through some of my lists, some of my social media activities, and see individuals that I was connected with and start to think about, pull down some of the information off of those lists for me. And then I was also getting referrals. So after my first and second transaction, people were starting to get pretty excited. I was getting some referrals from investors. Repeat investors is really beneficial. And then finally, I've been extremely active on social media and also, trying to be out there as much as possible in different news articles and podcasts. And I have gotten a few hits that way as well.
So what do you do social media wise to raise your profile?
We have hired a marketing firm to help us to start with some of our postings on social media. So they'll craft some of the ideas for us, and then I'll put the content together or some of the specifics. Sometimes they need a video and I'll put a video together. So I've been doing those types of activities. My wife left her job about a year and a half ago. She was working in corporate America as well. So she has been kind of my public relations lead, and she's been reaching out to podcasters, writers, editors, newscasters, and trying to get me out there as much as possible as well. So thanks to her, I've been out there more than in the last year than ever.
So I know that you had said that you had some sort of tips you wanted to share on capital raising. Obviously, this is, it's a topic of great interest to people. I think it's often one of the things that most intimidates people. They often feel like, oh, I can go find a deal, but raising money, that's scary, or I don't know if I can do it. But they realize that they need to either do it themselves, or they need to connect with people who can do it. But what are the things that you've learned over the last 12 months, that you've very successfully been raising capital? What are the kind of like key best practices that you've picked up over this time that can help somebody kind of get jump started in this?
The first thing that I learned was to spread out my communications. So not just bombard people with communications as much as possible. I'm on some capital raisers list or some syndicators list, and I feel like I get an email 3-4 times a day from them, and and eventually I ask them to stop, right? So I try to spread that out a bit, but also stay on the top of their mind to a certain extent. So it's a fine balance. But if you're raising capital for a transaction, start out with something small, just a little bite-sized piece of it to get their interest. So I like to put together a 1-page document to 3 pages on the deal itself and send that around by email. And that piques their interest. And then if you want to learn more, respond back to me on that email. That's the catch. And then a few days later, we'll have a detailed deck that we can send around, right? And then maybe a week later, it's a webinar that we sign up for. So just slowly dripping in, but not with the same story also each time. Separately, making sure that you have a good CRM tool. So working with a CRM tool that you are comfortable with, that you enjoy using, and you're keeping track of your communications with each investor. It's going to be really important once you get that larger list of investors that you remember when you last spoke with them and what you guys talked about. And the final thing that I would say on this is to network with your investors, groom and nurture that list of investors with a purpose. So making sure that you're reaching out to them, not just for a transaction, right? Nobody wants to just be your sales pitch every single time. So providing them with some content that they can learn from as well. So I've started to put together a quarterly newsletter that I'm sending out. And then on LinkedIn and Facebook, I'll post things that are just maybe educational or entertaining rather than sales pitchy as well, so that people don't kind of roll their eyes in their head every time they hear from you.
And how much sort of like personal networking do you do with people too? Is it really basically online that you're doing it, or do you meet people in person? Do you kind of connect on the phone? What are the things that you're doing to deepen the relationships or start the relationships?
Get yourself out there in making sure that you're providing value to your community as well. So I've started to create a meetup group in my area of investors. So just people that are interested in real estate, coming together, they want to learn about real estate. I've provided an education session at our local library, just as much as you can get your name out there, but also being able to provide value to others. I'll donate to a charity golf tournament and then attend it, right? And then I start meeting people there and chatting with them. It's a good way to give back, but also lead with a purpose and have people kind of curious and getting to understand a little bit more about you. So yeah, I do network, and I really try to make sure that people that I meet, I'm able to tell my story to see if they're interested or they know someone that's interested. You just got to be careful not to be too blunt about it, right? That you're being sales pitchy again, but just somehow having a discussion with them and talking to them more about real estate.
I always encourage people to do meetups. I think they're a really powerful thing if you do it right, because being the leader of something gives you authority, and people sort of attribute to you credibility, which maybe you don't even have, but it's great to kind of get that when you're starting out. um tell me about the meetup that you run. Like, what is it, how is it structured, how often do you meet, those kinds of things?
I've always been wanting to start a meetup, but I was nervous, cautious that I wouldn't be able to keep up with it, that the group would get old and it wouldn't be successful, right? That nobody would show up. But I was just spent one day and I just started on meetup.com actually. And I created a local meetup group for my area, for my town. And then I put an event up and I said, let's all meet at this bar on this date and just socialize, right, about real estate. So those of you that are interested in real estate, I didn't know if anybody would come. And I didn't know if anybody would join my meetup group, right? But I put it out there and I've had 65 people join in the last 3 months. And it was just kind of magical. It just, people started kind of coming. As long as you show that you're doing something, some type of activity, you don't have to lead it. Nobody was expecting me to get up in front of everyone and give a speech. I set it up as a social event where we could just have some very easy discussions over a pint of beer. And then as you get more comfortable with that group and you're understanding better what they want, then you could bring in guest speakers and things like that, and maybe just meet once every couple of months or once a quarter.
Yeah, I think it's a very good way to kind of just get yourself out there and meeting other people who are interested. But also the great thing about Meetup, or if you say market it with like an Eventbrite, is that you can get everybody's emails, right? So you can build a list for your for your meetup, but also build, those are potential investors as well. And now you've got their email addresses. So what, any other tips you want to share about, raising capital? Like, what do you think it was that made you so successful over these 12 months? Because again, I mean, as I said at the top of the show, this is a big, you said 7 million in 12 months. It's a lot, right? And starting from a cold start, essentially. I mean, even though you were in real estate and you kind of had pre-built your audience by talking about it all the time, you'd never tried to raise money from people before. So, what do you attribute that success rate to?
It's partly due to my credibility of the work that I've been doing in the past on real estate and openly talking about that. So at least I had a track record that I could point to. If you don't have a track record that you can point to, people will be less likely to invest with you, but you'll need to be able to tell your story somehow, or maybe others on your team have a track record that you can point to. So I had that track record and people kind of knew where we were headed. The other thing was not being too pushy. So being trustworthy. So when I had those initial conversations, I never tried to push the deal. I never tried to push the transaction. I wanted to have a conversation with them that was meaningful for them about what are they investing in now? What do they want to invest in? What are their interests in real estate? What do they know about real estate? And educating them. And if they wanted to invest with me, great. If not, maybe the next deal would be for them, or they might know someone that could invest with me. So I'm going to be successful if others are successful. And that's going to be your main point in this capital raising game, is not trying to be a used car salesperson, right? And pushing to put people's money into your deals, finding the deal that's the right fit for them, that they're going to win on. And then you're going to be happy and also be successful.
I mean, there is, to some extent, sort of like a numbers game here, right? I mean, not every deal is going to be right for every person. And even deals that are right for people, the timing may not be right for them, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me that somebody has told me that they were going to invest in a deal, or they're going to invest in the next deal. And then the next deal comes up and they're like, oh, I decided to buy a house. Oh, I need the money for the kids' tuition, to private school this semester. Or, there's like there's a million and one reasons why somebody may not be able to do it that time, even though they want to. So you really need to have like a big enough list of people that that you can fill your raise, given that, some people will be in, some people will be out, people change their minds, people have stuff come up, people don't see your email. It could be any one of a number of reasons, but I think people have a misconception about capital raising, that they are doing that used car salesman thing that that you said not to do, right? That they think they have to convince somebody to be in a deal. you're never going to convince anybody to be in your deal, you know, but you have to have enough people who on your list that it just appeals to and the timing is right, so that then you can fill it when it comes up, right?
That's 100% right. I mean, I have one interesting situation where an old coworker of mine said he wanted to invest in real estate, decided not to invest in the deal, but he referred 3 people to me and they all invested. So it might not be that person you're talking to right now, but if you build that trust, could be others, and there will be others that will come.
Yeah. And it's always about the deal too, right? I mean, like you're not, I guess what I'm trying to say is you're not trying to like convince anybody of anything. It's like if you're appealing to them with the right thing at the right time and the right person, right? So you don't have to sell anything, that it kind of sells itself as long as you've hit your investor at the right time in their life, right? For this
Yeah.
particular deal. Yeah. Anything else you want to share with the audience on this topic? Capital raising secrets, capital things you shouldn't do as a capital raiser, anything that comes to mind?
The other thing I would think that people need to think about is always reaching out to your investor group individually as well. So your investor hopefully better than anyone. And I can't tell you whether you should be texting them, calling them, or emailing them, but you should be doing one of those 3 things. Otherwise, they're just a stale investor that you're not going to hear from. So I also created this kind of method of reaching out to at least 9 people 3 times a week, right? So it's the 3 cubed method. I send 3 texts, 3 to 3 individuals, 3 emails, and 3 phone calls 3 times a week, right? And I schedule that, and I really try to do it, try to spend time on those things. If they reach back out to me, great. I keep the log in my CRM. If they don't, then we'll kind of move them further down the list perhaps, or just keep up with communications through our routine process, but make them specific, unique. It's nice to connect with individuals and make it something fun for yourself, of being able to reunite with a friend or family. I've talked to people that I haven't talked to for 35 years, right? That now that I'm in real estate and they've reached out to me, I've been able to reconnect with them. It's been fantastic.
Do you schedule this? Like, how do you manage your day, and how do you approach this process? Like, I know there are people who, the first 3 hours of the day, every day is prospecting, and other people have a more, I wouldn't say scattershot approach, but just a more like they get it done, but it's not scheduled. So what's your approach to this?
So maybe a tip for that a lot of us use in the industry is Calendly. Something like that, a good calendar manager where someone can go in and you can block off the times when you're able to meet with individuals, right? I'm most productive in the morning. So I've always found that I lose productivity after lunchtime. So I'm most productive in the morning. So I try to actually keep those open and not have any meetings in the morning times for me. And then I'll stack my meetings on a certain day. So on Wednesdays is kind of a meeting day. And Fridays, I like to keep myself open for potential investor meetings as well. Friday, one tip, Friday is the best day to reach out to investors. They're just getting ready for the weekend. Their mind's out of the work mode, even though they're probably sitting at the office, and they're looking for a distraction, and you could be that distraction. So I love Fridays for investor discussions.
That is a great tip. I would not have thought Friday would be, I would have thought the opposite, that Friday would be a day when they were really out the door, and not wanting to take a call, but that's very interesting that they want to be distracted on a Friday.
Do it early before they leave for the early afternoon. But yeah, I'd say before 3 p.m. on a Friday is a great time to reach out by text or email.
And then how do you, when you're out there meeting people, what's your process for making sure that the people that you're meeting are actually getting into your CRM in the first place? Because that's one of the mistakes I made early on, was not capturing the information, or winding up with like a stack of business cards that just sat in a pile someplace and never taking advantage of it. But do you have a system for that?
I'm still working on that as well. I tend to be great at networking. I'll meet anyone. I could just go up and chat with somebody for a very long time, but then making that last move to make sure that we make that connection, and I get their information, they get my information. Sometimes I kind of lack that. So I'm still working on that aspect. My wife gives me trouble about it every day, but LinkedIn is our best way. So we like to connect with the individuals that I've met at a minimum. So when I come home from a golf fundraiser, my wife will say, "Who'd you meet?" And I hand her the stack of business cards, or I tell her the names of the individuals, and she'll connect me with them on LinkedIn. And at a minimum, they'll be able to see what I'm up to, right? And they can reach back out to me. That, and then we try to also get them into our CRM tool as well. But you have to stay on top of it. It's so easy to just kind of say, okay, I got this person's name and conversation on a piece of paper. I'll just leave it on my desk. And before you know it, you forgot how you met them or why you met them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's and such a wasted effort, right? Because you've gone to all the effort to go to the networking event. And if you meet people and you don't get their information, it's what did you go for? So it's really important. Listen, we're kind of running out of time. Any sort of final thoughts on this topic that you would like to share with the audience?
Just keep pushing. You may not be able to start out as quickly as I did. I do think my past network was extremely helpful, but if you really just think about a strategy and start putting that into play and just keep repeating it, you'll be successful, and it'll start to grow. You might be depressed on your first raise that you're only able to raise a couple $100,000, but that's a start, right? Couple $100,000 is really impressive. And then you keep pushing it, and eventually you'll get to that stage where you're able to raise millions of dollars on a transaction. So push forward, learn as much as you possibly can, and don't get down, but don't get down at times.
And if people would like to get in touch with you to perhaps join your list or just get to know you, what's the best way for them to be in touch?
Yeah, I've put together a paper with a bit of information on capital raising. So if anybody would like that, they can just send me an email. Or if you'd like to connect with me, interested in talking about real estate, I love doing that. My email address is info@groundbreakingre.com. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn and message me there as well.
Well, I encourage everybody to go and contact Craig and get on his list and see all the deals that he has available to him if you're at all interested in investing. Craig, thanks very much for your time today. And it was great getting to meet you and learning a little bit about you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Appreciate it.